him and shutting down churches. I see the Holy Spirit, the evidence of the Holy Spirit working in the president when he takes the kind of actions he does.
We want justice for George Floyd and his family. Everybody agrees on that. But this utter destruction and violence is not the way to do that.
And President Trump brought this back again to the country.
With Joe Biden, he hasn't even condemned Antifa. Just think about that for 1 minute. He hasn't condemned the rioters.
If you voted for Trump, you ain't black.
You have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I have to look at myself and black, because some people say, Herschel, you're not black. I'm like, no, I am black.
HBCUs and the things that the president has done to invest and to support the black community, that's how we grow out of this.
Keep finding the police is insane. The police are what protect us all from anarchy.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Promises Made, Promises Kept on Team Trump Online. I'm Katrina Pierson, Senior Advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign, and tonight's show is about the Great American Comeback. We will highlight and reflect on the accomplishments that President Trump has made to uplift Black communities across this country and how that deeply contrasts with Joe Biden's 40 years of failure, racism, and pandering. Tonight, I am joined by the former Speaker of the Oklahoma House of Representatives, T.W. Shannon, who is now the President and CEO of Chickasaw Community Bank and also currently serving on our Black Voices for Trump Advisory Board. T.W., welcome to Team Trump Online.
Hi, Katrina. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. But before we get started, T.W., I wanted to play this clip from the President's Transition to Greatness Roundtable event at Gateway Church in Dallas, Texas. Let's take a look.
And oftentimes you may not hear about this, but we sit and convene in such as this with all of these stakeholders at one table to have the hard conversations. What is the pain of the community? Why is the community distressed? And what can we do together, both black and white, Democrat and Republican, come together for the good of this community, for long-term sustainability, for generational impact. And because of that, because of these partnerships, because of this collaboration together, and many people all at this table have been working together to bring about generational impact. So long after we're gone and history tells the story, the Opportunity Zones is more than just a program. It's more than just a concept. It is a mission that is to outlast all of us. And I tell you that as you're here, because a lot of times people see a government program as just a check the box. This is not a government program. This is built from the grassroots, from the bottom up, to affect the people in America.
That was former NFL player Scott Turner, who is currently serving as the executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council. And I think it's important for people to see just how dedicated and passionate that the president's team is about serving the Black community. And TW, for the first time in my lifetime, we have a leader who is serious about making America great again for everyone. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Katrina, just looking at that panel got me excited about the future of America. I mean, when I think about Scott, who's a good friend, former state representative from Texas, who just did a great and upstanding job of pushing forward conservative values, to hear him talking about the president's initiatives on opportunity zones is pretty exciting, because we know it's making a real difference in our communities. I mean, you think about the impact that over 9,000 communities have been impacted by opportunity zones. That means that more than $100 million is going to flow into those communities. Capital is a coward. It will not flow to a hostile environment. And President Trump knows this better than anybody. And that's why his administration has been focused on things like allowing people to keep more of their money with the historic tax cut that was passed. This is making a real difference, not just in the Black community, but in the community at large and in America. And it's the reason that we're going to come out of this pandemic and recover quicker than I think anybody's really expecting. But I'm excited about what opportunity zones means for America, and I'm excited about what it means even in my home state of Oklahoma.
Yeah, it has been really exciting. And, we hear a lot of these personal impact stories along the way as well, and we'll get to one of those in shortly. Now, before the pandemic artificially interrupted this historic economic gains, President Trump's pro-growth and deregulatory agenda resulted in the lowest unemployment rate for Black Americans in history. Now, the media and the Democrats, were shocked, when last week's May job reports came out and, showed that our great American comeback is underway with the largest 1-month jobs gain in history. So no wonder the media is trying to ignore this and focus on all of the distractions. I mean, TW, can you go over this incredible feat and how it was achieved? I mean, what this means for Black Americans, that this comeback was much sooner than anticipated, and it's clear evidence that President Trump knows how to unleash our economic potential.
Well, the truth is nobody should be surprised. I mean, with the foundation that was laid the first couple of years of the Trump presidency, it really set the country on the right path. We saw historic lows in African-American unemployment rates, and we saw historic lows in reductions in the poverty rate for African-Americans, which was at 21%, down from 22% the year before Trump took office. And so I don't know why the media is so surprised, but the media continues to surprise me on what it likes to focus on, because the reality is African Americans are doing better under the Trump administration than any administration in the history of the American presidency. And that's a story that we need to be telling. It's one of the reasons that I signed up to be a part of the Black Voices for Trump initiative, is because that's a story that's just not getting told in the mainstream media. I'm so excited that people like you that are on the team and others are out telling that story, because it's one that needs to be told, because it's making a real difference in families across the country. And I've always said, if you want a strong America, you want a strong country, it starts with strong families. But people have to have a job. And that's why I'm also excited that the president was so focused on getting the country open and getting the country back to work. And while we relied on a lot of the governors and at the state level to shepherd the pandemic response, the reality is not allowing Americans to return to their jobs, not allowing people to provide for their families is probably the most un-American thing we could ever think or imagine. And I'm so excited the president has been laser focused on jumpstarting this economy. But it didn't just start during the pandemic. It started 3 years before with the historic tax cuts and the focus on allowing people to keep more of their own money.
Yeah, that buffer is something the media doesn't want to talk about. I mean, you have to look and see if President Trump had not built the buffer in the economy that we had, we'd be in some serious trouble right now. So his forward thinking, his determination has really put us in a good position post-pandemic. And, we all have our own journeys. We've all had our own experiences. And so we all have our favorite policies. So TW, in your opinion, what are the top policies from the Trump administration that you believe are helping Black Americans the most?
Katrina, when we think about the policies that have most impacted the Black community, I think it starts with creating the regulatory environment that is going to allow businesses to thrive and to flourish. In banking, we see it all the time. We try to help people's dreams come true. And we deal with a lot of minority businesses, a lot of minority homeowners, and we see them all the time facing government bureaucracy and their inability to get things done because there's a government bureaucrat who stands in the way of good business. President Trump's administration came in day one and said, we're going to cut red tape. We're going to send some sense of deregulation that's going to make a difference. And it is. We're already seeing it. It's one of the reasons that the poverty rate for African Americans fell to the lowest historic that it's ever been. It's also a reason that we've seen unemployment rates drop. It's because the president has been laser focused on jobs. It's about jobs. It's about jobs. It's about jobs.
It is about jobs. It's really leveling the playing field because, I ran into a lot of beauty salon owners and barbershops who had so much red tape just at their level. I just can only imagine what it would be like to try and open a larger company and have to go through those hoops and hire the attorneys and check the boxes and do all the paperwork. Getting rid of that red tape truly does level the playing field in so many ways. But now that we have an opportunity with the president to help level the playing field so that underserved communities can really get involved, and do what many of us done prior to all of this madness, is to get out there and make something happen. But we also know that underserved communities have, for decades been presided over by majority Democrat leaders. And, during the election year, they go visit the churches and community centers, make promises, stand at the microphone, and then suddenly forget and decide not to follow through once they're elected. But what we have differently with President Trump, and in 2016, he asked Black voters, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
And a lot of them gave him a chance, and he's delivered more results in 4 years for Black America than the first Black president did in 8 years. And worse, more than 40 years of Joe Biden. So when we talk about opportunity zones, that was really a game changer for a lot of people. Take a moment and tell the viewers how this actually impacts the community.
Yeah. Well, I think even before we go there, Katrina, when you think about the impact that the Trump administration has had on the African American community, I mean, it really is historic. I mean, whether we're talking about promises made, promises kept, or we're talking about opportunity zones, this president has really done a good job of saying that this is what needs to happen and this is how we're going to make it happen. And I think opportunity zones are just one of those great examples of where he kept his commitment. He said that these underserved, underprivileged communities that have been ignored for generations, where Democrats have come in, just as you mentioned, we've all been there. I grew up in an predominantly African-American church, and it's really, what I've learned is it's really not about the politicians that show up the day before the election. It's those that show up and deliver the day after the election. And
Right.
President Trump, for 3.5 years, almost 4 now, has made that commitment, and he's kept that commitment to the African-American community. And the proof is in the numbers. I mean, the reality is it's an election year. And I think, like all Americans, we get a little, we pay a little close. We don't pay as close attention to what I think our elected officials say when they're running for office. I think that's a natural instinct for African Americans, but also for all Americans during the election season. But the reality is, what my grandmother always told me was, don't pay attention to what people say, just watch what they do. And I think President Trump's record stands on its own, particularly for the African American community.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see, in future elections, because I think one of the issues was simply there were some candidates that just didn't show up and ask for the vote, and President Trump has even changed that. So it's going to be exciting in future election cycles now that we're going to force people to actually compete to get this vote. And so I mentioned earlier, TW, about a personal impact story that I wanted to share with people, because it really helps to see exactly how one of these policies can impact an individual. So let's take a look at this story of Paul Morrow. He's an Army veteran and small business owner who benefited from President Trump's pro-growth policies. Let's take a look.
We are in a different phase in life. We don't found the new era. The new administration here, geared in by, Mr. Donald Trump. They done created what they call it, the OZ, the Opportunity Zone. I just purchased the first 275 acres of a 400-acre plot in the new Opportunity Zone. And you heard the president talking about the opportunities and the resources that became available.
So TW, what has President Trump done to ensure that future success is never defined by income or zip code?
Well, first of all, Katrina, the president knows firsthand that you cannot tax your way to prosperity. I mean, when you think about what has made this country great, what has made this one of the best countries to invest in, it is really an environment where people know that they can invest safely and expect a decent return. And so the idea that the Democrats have been proffering for generations, that just give me a little bit more of your freedom, give me a little bit more of your liberty, give me a little bit more of your money, and I'll make it better for you. Well, that 40 acres and a mule that they've been promising, I'm just determined it's not going to show up. And what we need is a president, what we've needed for a long time is a president who is going to ensure that there is an environment where investment and where capital will flow. And that's what we're seeing happen. And that clip was a great example. Real people are benefiting from the policies of this president. We're seeing it time and time again. That's just one of many stories. I mean, you think through, You think about where we would be right now during this pandemic had we the economy that we had back in 2008 before President was elected. If we were in those type of shackles, this economy was pent up with that much demand, and we hadn't unleashed the full power of American ingenuity. I don't know where our country would be right now, but thank God that we had an environment that President Trump had created a culture of investment where people want to invest. And now what we're seeing is they're investing in historic areas that have been ignored for generations. And I think that's the most exciting part about this presidency.
Yeah, and then also when you look at the investment that the president's administration has made, making capital available to minority-owned businesses too, to even expand. So I think this is a huge deal for Black communities. And, you know, I mentioned earlier, TW, about leveling the playing field. And one of the main things that I believe, and you can give me your opinion, that I believe levels a playing field is a quality education. Right. And school choice is definitely a priority for President Trump, and he knows that providing strong K-12 education has been shown to increase future success. So these actions are going to have, you know, profound impacts on Black communities for generations, because a quality education is definitely the equalizer when it comes to success and getting out of bad circumstances, regardless of your race. So, you know, in that vein of education, President Trump has also done unprecedented things for historically Black colleges and universities. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, first, even President Barack Obama said, Katrina, when he was running, I'm old enough to remember when he said that the great civil rights struggle of the 21st century is access to a quality education. But for whatever reason, the Democrats that control the House and around the country, they have fought time and time again against choice initiatives for education. And what we know is parents are the ones that are best equipped to make decisions about their child's education. But we've seen them fight it time and time again. But even beyond the K-12 effort, at the college level, what we've seen is historically is that African-American rates for graduation are below those of their peers. But one area where African-American rates tend to increase is at our HBCUs, our historically Black colleges and universities. And both my parents are graduates of Langston University and one HBCU here in Oklahoma. And so I've got that thread running through my veins, and I'm excited about the opportunity to provide in my family, but I'm also excited about what HBCUs have done for this nation as a whole. And President Trump gets that. And that's why we've seen this president make more investment, increase by over 13% the investment for HBCUs. And not only did he do it during one funding period, but he made it a permanent funding initiative as well. And so we're going to see our HBCUs really thrive. And I've talked to my president here at Langston University in Oklahoma, and they're seeing the benefits of what that increased investment can do. Because again, the best way to prosperity, if we're going to change and break the cycle of generational poverty, and that's really what we're talking about. You've got to have a quality job. You've got to have a quality work environment. You've got to have a quality environment that encourages investment. But on a personal level, you got to have an education that responds to the needs of the private sector. And our HBCUs do a great job of that. But for far too long, they've been hamstrung by funding issues. And the Trump administration has met that head on. And I'm very proud of the work that they've done in the areas of HBCUs.
Yeah, you know, what's so interesting about that policy specifically is that the president didn't have this set out to do. I mean, this is something that he learned while in office, and he tells the story frequently, and the media just won't cover it. And what was happening is once he was elected, every year, the chancellors and presidents of these historically Black colleges and universities were coming to get funding from the president. So by year 2, he noticed they're back again. And then by year 3, they came back, and he asked them a simple question. It's like, why do you keep coming back? And their answer was, well, they've always made us do this. I mean, how heartbreaking is that? How do you plan anything education-wise? How do you plan your programs? How do you plan your staff? How do you plan for your teachers if you have to wait every single year to get funding? And that's what President Trump says. He goes, what? This doesn't make any sense. And so President Trump gave them permanent funding and told them to go back, take care of their schools, take care of their kids. And that is how that policy came to fruition, because President Trump noticed that that was a hazard for Black colleges and universities because they couldn't properly plan. And now they have permanent funding and they don't have to go back and beg for funding anymore. And I think that is a story that is worth being told. And the other thing is, when you hear a story like that, TW, it makes you wonder why President Obama didn't do that, why he continued to force these schools, these presidents, to come in hat in hand every year to ask for funding. He could have easily have done the exact same thing. And when you have somebody like Joe Biden, who's been in office for 4 decades, this has never been something that he's championed. I mean, he calls himself a friend of the Black community, and he's never said, hey guys, let's make sure these Black colleges have funding. No one even said anything about it. And I think that's really disturbing. And so this election year, I think, is going to be really important. Now, speaking of Joe, he has had decades-long opportunity to prove himself to Black America. But unfortunately, instead, he has an actual traceable pattern of racist and bigotry behavior. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Why don't you share a little bit about what Biden has on his record, TW?
Well, you know, Beijing Biden, it's been amazing to me to watch him try to invent himself as this messiah of the African American community, that we need him to come in and save us from ourselves and to save us from the brink of destruction. But the reality is, Beijing Biden hadn't showed up for the African American community in the 40 years that he's been in public office. And frankly, I don't expect him to do it now. I mean, whether it's him delivering the eulogy for known racists like Robert Byrd, or we're looking at, you know, the comments that he made. Just, I mean, again, it's one thing to have a history and to have an evolution. I get that. We make allowances for that. The country's come a long way, and many people's attitudes have changed. But it was just a month ago that Beijing Biden was also looking folks in the camera on an African-American broadcast network, or maybe it was online. I think it was an online network, where he looked somebody in the eye and he said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. Well, I'm sorry, Joe, I'm not voting for you, and I am Black. And I'm proud to be Black, and I'm also proud to be voting for Donald Trump, because I know that we need a president that's not focused on just pandering and promises that will never be delivered, but a president who has a real record of delivering for the African American community. And that's what President Trump has done. So I'll put his record up against Joe Biden's. I'll put President Trump's 4-year record for African Americans against Joe Biden's for 40 years any day of the week.
Yeah, you know, we're going to do just that throughout the remainder of this campaign. And so what would you tell Black voters who are still considering to vote for Joe Biden?
Well, you know, it's always hard to leave what you've known and what you've always been comfortable with. You know, so many African Americans have voted Democrat for the last 40 years because they've not felt like they've had a real alternative. They've not had a real champion for the issues that they care about, and so we're suspect. And as a people, we tend to be a little suspect of everybody, and I think that's okay. With the history that we've had, I think it's understandable. But now we have a candidate that has a real record of delivering on issues that are important to us. Promises made, promises kept. And so what I would say to African Americans, you know, Donald Trump posed the question 4 years ago, what do you have to lose? I mean, I would pose the question, what have you gained? And when you look at the statistics, when you look at the reality of where we are as a country, where we are as an African American community, it's better than it's ever been from a statistical standpoint. And I think it's only going to get better under this president. So my advice to any African American who's still considering who to vote for, what party to be a member of, if a two-party system has been good for America, I believe a two-party system is good for African Americans. And we need to do all that we can to tell that story. And that's why people like you, people like the others that are involved in Team Trump, are telling the message of President Trump's record.
Yeah, and it's an exciting record to get out there and tell. So we're excited to get back out on the road and tell it. So thank you, TW. Now, before I get your final thoughts, I want to take a moment to give our audience several ways to get involved, because the election is only 5 months away, and there's still so much you can do from home to make sure that we secure 4 more years of President Trump. First, you can download the new Trump 2020 campaign app and sign up at armyfortrump.com to get more involved. And to stay in touch with the campaign, text TRUMP to 88022. TW, your final thoughts for the evening?
Well, I would just say, Katrina, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always a privilege to be with you and to talk to those that are considering voting for President Trump. And I would just say the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you look at President Trump's record on African-American issues, even during this pandemic. The latest numbers reveal that 2.5 million jobs have returned to this economy, even during a pandemic. And I think that just speaks to the leadership that we have in President Trump. And it also speaks to the viability of the economy that he's created up to this point. And so for African Americans, the real question is, we have faced as a people generational poverty. And the question for us is, how do we move beyond that? How do we move beyond that? And it really starts with private investment, not a government handout, but it starts with leadership and people that are willing to make private investment into our communities. Opportunity zones is just one way that that's being done, but you look down the board at criminal justice reform, you look down the board at unemployment rates, there's a real record here to run on. So don't focus on personalities, focus on policy. And if you do, your vote is going to be for Donald Trump, I'm sure.
TW Shannon, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Katrina. I'm always happy to be here.
And thank you to everyone at home for tuning in. Tune in 7 nights a week for more Team Trump Online. And if you like this program, please like and share the broadcast. Check out our online schedule for the next episode of Promises Made, Promises Kept. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.
We are one movement, one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. And we will make America great again. And the best is yet to come.
We choose truth over facts.
A composite that our sketch artists put together after interviewing Biden event attendees is unveiled.